Hey, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Makes it a
Yeah.
little bit easier, yeah. No, not up to-
Well, I don't know. The background you have doesn't really show a pretty picture, but for us, it's it's not too bad.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of our sets from the book. It's scary. We're considering it like a psychological horror in a sense that, if you're a fan of things like The Shining or The Ring, it has a lot of elements of that. Um, Coming from working on a lot of video games, things like Silent Hill, that I worked on, or I worked on The Suffering, Resident Evil, it's got a very much a lot of that vibe. But people who are fans of Quiet Place or Last of Us will really kind of relate to it because it's not just gore horror. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that are pretty bloody and disgusting, but I think from our perspective, this one is one that kind of sticks with you because of the psychological side of things. And so it's kind of a creepy, very unsettling book for sure. And beautiful because it's painted, every panel is painted. So it's kind of a dreamy quality about it to go along with the story. Christopher Shy. Right? Exactly. It's an inspiration for it, I think, in a thematic way, in a poetic kind of way. I had started this story with another writer, Brandon Humphreys, and Brandon and I have worked in the game industry for many, many years, and we collaborated on this story and a couple other books as well. Another one called Infex, another one called Nova Scotia, and we have always had a fascination for like authentic, real science kind of blending its way into the sort of the scary side of things, almost like the X-Files in a sense that, it started off with something that's real and then kind of takes a very dark and twisted turn to it. So Brandon and I had started to experiment with some ideas, and me coming from a sound background and both of us working in video games, the kind of the undercurrent and the story behind this was really inspired by something that was happening that the military and some other people were doing, and not to give away too much of the story, but they were using sound not just for communication, but also potentially as a weapon. And so we wanted to sort of take this idea of a signal that could affect people on a human level, as opposed to whales and dolphins or other animals that could be affected by sound. And that became the premise for Frost. And so the story is about a guy who wakes up in the town of Frost Road, and the whole town has been devastated by something that's going on. And he seems to be immune to it, but what's happening to the survivors that's there is not as kind. And they seem to be, every time this signal ripples through town, they start ripping themselves apart. So the horror aspect of it is kind of creepy because that's sort of what zombies do, but usually they're doing it to other people. This case, they're doing it to themselves. And so we call this book kind of like a zombie movie in reverse, because he's actually trying to protect these people and get them out of the town of Frost Road. And they're as much of a danger to themselves as they are to him and the other survivors. So it's kind of a psychological horror because none of the characters trust each other, and all of them have sort of a secret to hide, and some of them don't even know sort of how they're connected to the story. And so that's why it's kind of a neat story that keeps you kind of guessing, even with the main characters in terms of their relationship to what's happening in the town. Yeah, that's a really good question. The world, from a plot-based standpoint, it's the concept of the world and what's happening there, but it is an ensemble cast, and each of the characters, really, in terms of following their stories, is kind of fun because it's the play on the characters and the distrust between each of them. So I would say it's a pretty good balance between the two. But at the same time, it really is the kind of story where um, you get kind of lost in the world because it takes place over one day. The whole story is from morning till that evening, and very contained in the town of Frost Road. So I think that that's sort of the benefit of this. And even though, you would see something like this could be an episodic series or something they would see as a dramatic series, this is more envisioned as a scary psychological thriller film, and it plays out much more like that.
Yes, I have. Ooh. Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it's definitely one to keep the lights on a little bit, or in this case, maybe plug your ears, if that's a way to say it without giving too much away. But it's definitely a unique take on the zombie thing. Again, it's done in a way that is never really seen, and it's kind of based in science. And so I would say Keith does it in a really tasteful way, for sure. And I think Christopher executes it wonderfully. I mean, his paintings, I'll help speak for him, is just obviously very depth with Yuri Lowenthal, painting his likeness, and Chris J. Alex and Edo Ross, and making sure that everyone is completely done in a unique and tasteful way, and just kind of like there are some blood in it and there's some action, but it's very well done. I must say so. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a lot more. Yeah.
And Keith, go back like 10 years and give him the full story.
So, yeah, no, you're right, and it's interesting that you kind of see that in this. Is that Frost was developed for me to kind of progress my career as a director working in video games into motion pictures and television. And the idea is that because I love telling stories, as anyone who's around me for more than 5 minutes knows, and so I really had wanted to start developing my own stories because I was working on a lot of larger franchises like Call of Duty and Spider-Man and Titanfall and all these great franchises that I was getting to direct all the actors and the performances and motion capture and facial capture and voiceover. And a lot of the actors were like, "We love your stories. When are you going to direct?" And so as I started to direct and create my own projects, most of them were way too big. They were just so high budget and such a huge scope. So the first book I did with Christopher Scheid, the same artist that we worked on this project, we did a project called Ascend, and it was the number one book on Image. It was like the number 17 book in the country. When it came out, we were on the cover of previews, and the book sold out worldwide in like 4 days. And it's had three sold out printings ever since then. And Hollywood came and huge producers and studios, and we had all these film deals. Um, and I had created it so I could, finally move into directing. And everyone's like, "Oh, this movie is fantastic. It's going to be $150 million, and you don't get to direct it, and you don't get to write it, and we're going to produce it. And thank you." And I was like, "What?" But I was doing this so I could learn how to direct. So I started working on smaller and smaller scope of the projects, and I did a few Infects and Dead Speed and a couple other projects. And about 10 years ago, I had actually developed the screenplay for Frost Road, and it was designed and actually set up as a film for me to direct, which was phenomenal. And as life has an interesting way of interfering with all the projects we do here at our studios, and we've got 5 recording studios here, and everything was going great. And I got this film going, and I'm in the middle of directing Modern Warfare 2 and a whole bunch of other games, and we were wiped out by a fire, just completely wiped out. We were out of town, and a cooling fan, circulation fan, had an 18,000 degree spark and set this whole place on fire. And so my film career got put on hold and my game career got put on hold. We had to rebuild our studios. And it really kind of focuses you. I mean, having a fire, if you can avoid it, I highly recommend it because it is a very disruptive thing. And as we can see what's happened to everyone in the Palisades and all over Los Angeles and the wildfires, it is unbelievable how devastating a fire can be to what you do in your life. And so unfortunately, Frost got put on hold. And as 10 years ago, then the economy was in kind of bad shape, and all of a sudden, low budget movies were not getting made, and there was a shift over into streaming. And meanwhile, video games are doing great. And so I continued to work in video games. And all the meanwhile, I had this great screenplay, and Christopher and I had been working on stuff. So as I had boarded out the film with a guy named Trevor Goring, who'd done Watchmen and the X-Men and a whole bunch of other great movies, Christopher and I loved working together and had been working on several other projects. And Christopher started painting the book. And finally, over COVID, we're like, we are finishing this book. And we did. And we finished it about a year ago. And the book is actually done. And during that time, I had also been developing a book with Wesley Snipes called The Exiled with my producing partner, Adam Lawson. And so we did a Kickstarter about a year and a half ago. It was very successful, and book has done really, really well. And there's some great announcements about to come out with that. But I realized that Kickstarter was such an amazing way to actually move forward with this project. And as the film industry has still been recovering, and we had a big strike in Hollywood last year, this was the perfect opportunity for us to turn this script and this artwork into this graphic novel. And that's why it has a very film like size and the presence. And like you said, the scope of this seems very, very big because it really did come from a pretty big background. And we had so much behind this. And we've worked on animatics and storyboards and audio dramas and actors' attachments to this. So it's pretty well developed. And whereas a lot of Kickstarters are, I think, in a different position, trying to raise money to get a book funded and financed and developed, we're actually in a little bit of a different situation because the book is now finished and we're actually looking to get this printed and fulfilled. So it's been a interesting journey, but the nice thing is the story is timeless, and here we are, 10 years in the making, and it's finally here. Right, right, exactly. That's such a, yeah, no. The nice thing is, yeah, the technology. If anything, what's really scary about it is that if you follow the news and you see some of the things that's happened, just in terms of, and I don't want to give away too much of the story, but there's a lot of stuff that's been happening, not just in the military and in the oceans, but also some of the new lithium salt mines that have been discovered and other things. Once you read the story and you start to realize that a lot of this is already based in science, there's a lot of new stuff going on. They're like, wait a second, this is like what's going on in Frost Road. And so it kind of makes the story even scarier because you know how real it is. So yeah, so I think this is the kind of story that's going to stick with people for a little bit longer than some of our other books because it is very true to life. I mean, sex.
Shock value for sure.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much just doing the thing. And so what I mean by that is like, okay, what is your project? What are you trying to do? What is the scope? What is your cost? What are you trying to actually do with the project? And are your tiers going to help you get across in funding? Because sometimes people might like have too low of tier rewards, and they may have the backers, but they may not have the funding because of those things. So you have to really kind of
Hmm.
plan it out, make sure that you have a long roadmap leading up to it. I mean, one of the things we did is we started talking in December to hopefully get this ready in March, and then life happens obviously, and
Yeah.
we wish we had more time. But it's very much you have to plan, like be patient. As much as I know you probably want your project to be in people's hands and you want the money, you want it to be a success, like you have to take the time because if you put 100% into it, it should hopefully come back to you 10 times, right?
Hmm.
So if you just kind of like short skirt it or cheat cut it, as we all know, it never works out. So again, I think if you want to get into Kickstarter, like first off, know who your audience is. And what I mean by audiences, are you comics? Are you graphic novels? Are you video games? And then from there, get even more specific. Are you horror? Are you slice of life? Are you, celebrity driven? Whatever the case may be, really know who that person is. Like almost identify them in your head almost like
Yeah.
this book is for my cousin and she is this and this, and it's like because then you know exactly who you're marketing to, because then you can go to like SEO searches for like Google Analytics. And I know that's a lot of word salad
Yeah.
scramble, right?
It's
What I'm saying,
letters. They're all letters.
yes, but what I'm getting at is that once you realize how it all kind of interconnects, and you have to kind of lay that foundation to hopefully build a successful Kickstarter campaign, it really does help. So again, to answer your question, it's just making sure it's planned and trying to get as many interviews as you possibly can, and reaching out to Sam, who is the head of Kickstarter, and he's wonderful. He's been a real supporter of ours, and he's been championing us, telling us what to do, what not to do, and understanding that you're going to be surprised. Like this past weekend for us, we weren't expecting, but I think Sunday was our second best day. And granted, we've only been going for a week, but it's like, that's interesting. Why did it hit? Because people are reading their emails, or is it because they're catching up on interviews we've done? You kind of have to prepare for everything and anything to kind of answer the question.
And
Hmm.
what's interesting is there's the flip side to that is the audience side, because a lot of people are still unfamiliar with using Kickstarter. And what we're finding is that we're hitting a demographic of people that obviously, there's a loyal Kickstarter base, and we're definitely giving back to the community. And if you look at our stretch goals and some of our reward tiers, we're very much supporting up and coming creators like ourselves, and not just for the fans who want an autograph or something that's there, but actually have meet and greets and Q&A sessions and other things. So we're creating an opportunity with the Kickstarter for people to kind of learn from our experience in the industry, and after working on hundreds of video games and working in films and graphic novels, we can kind of give back a little bit.
Hmm.
But also for people who just have never backed a Kickstarter, it's a little daunting because you're putting in money for something that doesn't exist yet, and it's not in stores, and it might not fulfill. And then you get people that are a little worried about it, and they kind of watch the campaign, and you'll have a spike of people at the beginning, and then people kind of lurk and they kind of walk around, and they're like, well, when is this going to come? And then you see a surge towards the end. So I think that for us, we really wanted to give confidence to our backers to show them that, we've got a finished book. That's why we have so much artwork that we're showing in animatics and interviews. We have an amazing team that's done hundreds and hundreds of projects in the past to give everyone confidence that we're going to get the work done. The fact that the book is ready to go and we're in shape, ready for printing, and it'll be out this year at San Diego Comic-Con. Those are all great things that I think for people getting involved in a Kickstarter can get excited that that we're going to deliver on the book, and that's what I think is really exciting about what Kickstarter offers.
Yeah. I I come at it from an angle of like I love comic books. One of the shows that we do here is every Thursday we talk about, um comic books from comic stores, right? You go down to your local comic shop, you pick up your DC, your Marvel, your Image, whatnot, and you read it. And so it's a very straightforward way of getting your comics, but there is a sort of detachment you have when you're dealing with things that way. Whereas like with Kickstarter, correct me if I'm wrong, people feel invested, not just money, but like emotionally, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you guys hear? Is that people almost feel like they're part of the production?
Oh yeah. I mean, people are so connected because, we're doing updates, throughout the week. We're doing interviews where people get to talk to us. We're getting tons of messages just privately, people sending us messages and asking us about the campaign. It ties in with our social media, so people have direct contact with us and can ask us questions. And it gives us feedback in the book itself. So if people, like something about it or they want to be supported, even our digital tiers, we're allowing people to help get involved in either be executive producers or behind the scenes of what's going to happen with the film, or special thank yous, so they get to be part of the process. So you don't get to see that when you get a retail product in a store, but with a Kickstarter, you're there at the beginning when this thing is actually coming out, and it's something that you're never going to see anywhere except for Kickstarter. So that's a very personal connection to the creators, and I think for people like us, even though we've worked on such big productions, we really wanted to break down those barriers and let people get to know us as people. And that's why you can meet us at Comic-Con. We're always there at our booth signing. And people always, in the Hollywood are saying, well, why are you doing that? You shouldn't be that. You should, create a distance with the fans. And we're like, no, it's the opposite. Social media and conventions and Kickstarter allows us to be in direct contact with the fans and really kind of respond to what they like and what they don't like.
Will you change the ending if you hear that people don't, they want the character to live or die or whatnot?
Well, we can't in this project because it's done. And we're going to go to Christopher saying, hey, Christopher, those last 10 pages. Yeah, let's just. But it is interesting because we have talked about sequels and spin-offs and other things.
Yeah.
And if they're warranted, like I don't like the idea of doing a sequel just for the sake of marketing or financial gain.
Mm-hmm.
But we've done other stories together, and Christopher and I have actually worked on several other ones. And Chris is an amazing writer and has also created his own projects. So we're hoping that this is the first in a line of a catalog of projects that PCB can produce and develop and get out there. We're big fans of comics and graphic novels and having the physical coffee table books and that kind of side, but also, we're working in video games and other platforms. So we're hoping that we can kind of use our experience in the other industries to start to grow the community and come up with new things to allow other creators to get their work out there and not have to be stuck with printing and distribution costs that kind of hold back a lot of creators.
Right. Something that's interesting about this project. There's a lot of things interesting about this project, of course. But Keith, you have a long history of experience with audio, right? Did you know that you're doing a graphic novel? Did you know that unless it's one of those ones that you open it up and it plays the birthday song, you're like a birthday card. How does audio play a part in a graphic novel?
Well, two ways for us in this one. One is that sound is actually a foundational character in the book. One of the things that I kind of mentioned about earlier about this idea of a signal, I've always been fascinated about how sound affects us. And there are frequencies that we cannot hear, but we can feel. And in being an audio engineer and a musician, and I've been obviously in the audio space for so long, and also just the dark, twisted, warped side of me thinking that like, wow, that you could use sound as a weapon is pretty scary. And there's technologies out there where there are sound lasers where you can communicate over miles just using a laser of sound, finding the natural vibrating frequency of things. You've seen pictures of like bridges and other things that have ripped themselves apart, brand new bridges because of the resonating frequencies. And a lot of that relates to waves and sound. And so the fact that there are sounds in the world that we can't hear that could actually, destroy or hurt or kill someone, I thought was fascinating. And the fact that our government has been experimenting with things like that. So sound in a graphic novel was a really interesting challenge because these sound waves especially because the main character can't hear them or feel them, but he's experiencing it in this physical manifestation of what's happening to this town. So that was kind of fun, and visualizing that I think was kind of interesting. And we're even still thinking about how that would be visualized in a motion picture version of this. How would you see sound? And then the second side of my background is that when you're writing these characters, you very much hear the voices of how they sound and how they talk. And it's one thing if you write the dialogue, but the way you interpret as a reader might be different than the way I was interpreting that dialogue. And so one of the things that we've done, and we did this as an exercise just for motion pictures when we're doing like an animatic or taking a storyboard and delivering it into something so we can kind of show how that is. But the evolution of that is really creating motion comics and audio dramas. And so one of the things that we've been doing, and we're actually so excited about it that we're introducing it as a stretch goal as part of this campaign, is we want to create an audio drama as part of Frost Road and bring in people like Yuri Lowenthal and other actors that not only appeared with their likeness in the book, but also they're phenomenal actors. And so we recently have developed an amazing relationship with James and Chelsea from Dead Meat, and as part of their podcast, and also they're phenomenal actors. And Chelsea's been doing a tremendous amount of video games, and we've got to work with her on several projects. We wanted to partner with them to take this idea of taking the idea in the world of Frost Road and developing it into an audio drama and maybe even a full motion comic. And that way we can take the sound and the performances and all these great characters and deliver it in a companion piece that would go along with the book. So for fans that really love it, now they can experience it in kind of a different way.
That seems pretty cool. You're not sticking to and as a lover of comics, you're not sticking just to comics. You're trying to break barriers. Is that a sound pun? Maybe could be a sound pun. I didn't mean for that, but breaking barriers, breaking sound barriers, breaking other barriers. For anyone out there watching us live, you're watching us on YouTube or Twitch, youtube.com/The Keeg Show, or YouTube or twitch.tv/The Keeg Show. But we have some people here on YouTube that are watching us: Mary Lise and Stephane. I believe it's Stephane. It could be Stephanie, but there's no I, so I can't really tell. But Stephane says, when we are in our mother's womb, our first contact with the outside world is with sounds.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. When my daughter, before she was born, we used to take a pair of really nice headphones and we would play Frank Sinatra for her on my wife's stomach. And she would start dancing, and the most amazing experience of my life, genuinely, was, if you've seen someone who's pregnant and you see the baby movie, it's like right out of Alien. It's just unbelievably freaky. And my daughter would push out. And so I was there one night and I pushed back, and then she pushed somewhere else. And then we played a game for about 10 minutes. My daughter is not even born, and I'm playing a game with her, playing her Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
And it's great. And my relationship with my daughter to this day has been, that same playful kind of nature.
Yeah.
And she's always loved the sound and the music that we played for her even before she was born. So I 100% agree with that. Sound is such a huge part of our lives that it affects us in a lot of different ways.
I just had an image of you playing tic-tac-toe with a baby from the inside.
Oh my God, that's a totally different horror movie. I don't want to visualize that one. That one's scary.
There we go. And the user there wants to be known as Steph, just Steph. So thank you, Steph, so much for that insight, because sound is super important. What I found really fascinating is that you have Yuri Lowenthal and other actors involved with this. And my first question was, why? I mean, sure, motion comics and whatnot, but how does that add to the creative process by having real live actors?
Yeah, I think, if you look at Christopher's artwork, he has this amazing dreamlike quality and depth to his paintings. He uses acrylic and oils and all sorts of different textures and layers to create this really amazing depth. But if you also, even if you look at the picture behind you, there's a tremendous amount of photorealism, and he uses a lot of real world objects and other things to inspire his artwork. On some of the science fiction projects we're working with, Christopher will actually build models and create sets, and I'll share some with you at some point, and you can take a look at these, but these beautiful sets, and then he'll use that as reference, and then he'll paint based on the reference, so it looks photoreal. And the one problem I think when you're trying to do photorealism is keeping continuity with your characters. It's one thing if you're an artist and you're doing line work, right? Because then you have a model and you're creating a model. But when you're creating photoreal characters, keeping that model consistent is really a challenge. And so one of the things that Christopher and I realized after working on Ascend was that we really wanted to have actors help us create those consistent sort of character portraits and other things that's there. And so what I did is I did another project called Dead Speed that will probably be releasing in about a year and a half from now, but we actually did it before Frost. And also with Yuri, what we did was I got Yuri into costume. I gave him a shotgun. I gave him a machete. We got all these different looks for him, his hair. And then we went on location all over Los Angeles. We went to underground tunnels. We went to the Sepulveda Dam. And then we went to some really great locations. And I videotaped him going through what would be the boards for the story. But instead of just posing in a static pose, he would actually run or yell or do some dramatic kind of action. And Yuri, being a phenomenal actor as it is, was very realistic, but I could get the actual motion of what he was doing. And then I could cherry pick the perfect frames from that sort of motion storyboard to some extent. And then I would give that to Christopher. And as we were writing the script and explaining what we wanted to do, I could give him a model that he could then use that's there. And so it's not reusing photographs. So, what's interesting is even though it has a very photoreal look to it, it's still hand painted, but it does have that realism to the models that's there. So Chris Jai Alex from Transformers and Extraction and Edo Ross and a handful of other actors helped out in a very similar way. And so it's a really neat blend of that photorealism and the dreamlike painterly quality that Christopher does. And I'm just in awe of the work he does constantly, because his sense of composition is so dramatic. I mean, if you look at just the simple shot behind you, it's our character Hannah, and she's about to approach this house, and it just feels like a movie poster, right? And that's just a single panel from the book. And all the artwork we're sharing, all of our posters, everything are just panels from the book. But I feel that every single page and every panel is its own poster-worthy artwork.
Mm-hmm. Do you have? I'm trying to think of which road to travel by. You mentioned Yuri being on this, so now for anyone who doesn't know, where I got to know Yuri Lowenthal is playing the Spider-Man games on my PS5 now, but I think it was PS4 when I got it. Yuri played Peter Parker in that, and Keith, did I hear that you were involved with that game?
So I have directed 6 of the Spider-Man games. I did not do the Insomniac Spider-Man one with Yuri, surprisingly, even though Yuri and I have done, I don't know, hundreds of games together.
Yeah.
And Chris, I think, has a special connection to the Spider-Man game. Not that he worked on it, but I think he's platinum the game, I think.
Oh yeah, no, when I was fortunate enough to meet with Yuri for the first time over Zoom, I told him, I'm like, hey, how does it feel to be like how Kevin Conroy is to Batman? People view you as Peter Parker, because I told him, I'm like, dude, I have spent countless 30 hours plus swinging across New York over now 2.5 games, because Miles Morales was like an expansion game almost.
Yeah.
But it's like how does that feel? Because like that was my first platinum ever, and so to me, I always hear Yuri when I hear Spider-Man, and I know people have Toby, they have Andrew, and they have Tom, but for me, like my Spider-Man is Yuri, and it was kind of a surreal for him to just kind of have a moment. I mean Keith is like family with him practically, but for to see him genuinely take a moment and just be like, I don't feel comfortable with it, like very I don't know, it's very sweet and humble of him to just be like, I'm kind of uncomfortable with it, but I'm taking it day by day.
Yeah.
Yuri and his wife Tara are actually godparents to our children, and Yuri and I share the same birthday. We just had our birthday this last week, and so we've always had a very close connection. And it was fun, even the way I met Yuri, because Yuri came in the first time I met him. He was auditioning for a part he already had. He had been the Prince of Persia, and I was working on directing the performances for Prince of Persia 2, and the producers were taking it in a new direction. And so they were having auditions for the Prince of Persia. And I was like, well, why aren't you bringing the guy back in who did it? And like, well, we're trying something new. And so at the end of the day, they had him come in to audition for the same part, and he didn't get it. But Yuri and I ended up staying afterwards after his audition, because the audition was like probably 10 or 15 minutes. He
Yeah.
stayed here for another 4 hours, and we just completely geeked out on all the movies and games and everything that we love, and we've been fast friends ever since. And so we've done movies together. He was in my first motion picture that I directed. He's been in Infex and Dead Speed and Frost Road. And so Yuri and I love collaborating together. And he's also a writer and a creator in his own right. He's done his own television shows and films. And I know that they say there's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but I think there's probably like 3 degrees of Yuri Lowenthal, because Yuri is just involved in every aspect of our industry, and it's fantastic.
Do you feel like either of you have a lot of pressure being friends in real life and working professionally?
No, not at all. I think if anything, it's strength in numbers. The fact that we're so aligned creatively and wanting to see our industry succeed from a creative standpoint, from what's going on with the unions and the SAG strike, and protecting actors, with going on with AI and sort of how technology is changing. And so I think very much so that we're all creators, and we see where technology is going, and it's a tool that can be very helpful, and in the wrong hands can be very harmful. So to have a project like this that's hand created, and we're using actors, and we're hand painting things, and we're writing things, the old school way, it's we don't want to see that to be a dying art. We want to see that to be the basis of everything. And as the technology comes to fruition, and as it's moving forward, that we want to embrace that and use that as a tool for all of us to make it empower us to do things like this. So working with really high-end talent like Yuri, and having people on our team like Chris, like we can come together and really get to our audiences directly and not have to go the old school way. And I think that's going to change the way that authors are reaching their audiences by, you seeing these types of collaborations together.
I feel like there are so many hands in the pot with this. So many different people collaborating in different ways and adding their own things. And like, I think that you can definitely see it. I think that what I see from Frost Road is that it's handcrafted as much as a comic book, a graphic novel can be. It's handcrafted, and then through the Kickstarter, it's grassroots, right? So it's as organic as you could get,
Yeah.
Um,
And it's little things too. Like, I don't know, just to point out something.
Yeah.
If you look at the frame, so you just have one panel of the graphic novel behind you, right? And that's one of the posters there. But if you notice, there's a black frame just around that small image that's there. So RJ Cooper, who's like this amazing artist in his own right, and he's directed films and edited things for Bruce Willis and all sorts of other movies. He is this phenomenal artist, and doing a lot of stuff with InDesign and other things. And just to show you, just to point out how particular we are and coming together as a group, is he helped hand paint all of these borders around it, so it didn't feel like a standard comic book border, that it felt as organic as the artwork itself. And you'll notice in the book that the text, like the way the characters talk, there's not word balloons. Like you see kind of like this scrawled text by hand, and there's sound effects that are sort of like visualized, and the sound waves we talked about. So it really is this collaboration of artists and lending a lot of their input, and that extends out to the way we interact with the audience and how we interact with the Kickstarter audience. It's not just like a singular vision, but you kind of have this collective idea. So even though Christopher and I are considered like the creators, Brandon Humphreys, who wrote this story with me, had so much to be a part of the origin of this, and Trevor Goring with his storyboards and being able to sort of give us the pacing of where things are going to go. So it's nice to be able to collaborate on books like this and still be able to have some independence and not feel like you're just rushing it out to market to get another product out there, but it's really letting the audience kind of follow you as creators and be part of your journey.
I love it. It was stuck in the back of my head, and I was trying to figure out what this reminded me of, and I don't know if you guys have heard this before. There was an Arkham Asylum graphic novel from DC Comics.
Book. Yes, everything hand painted. Dave McKean. That's the book that got me started. Like literally that book. I'm glad you've seen it. I love that book. The Joker was terrifying in that, right? Just the way that he was painted, and the Dark Knight was Batman was so dark in that. That was the book that inspired me when I started all of this.
Yeah. I definitely, and I don't want to say it's like a inspiration for this, but definitely like I can see as a reader very similarities with the hand drawn or the hand painted, aesthetic to it. And they're both scary. It's not a hand painted rom-com. They're both hand painted, very scary stories.
And the idea that every panel is as detailed as the cover. And Christopher, I think the reason why Christopher and I have really enjoyed working together so long is that we both have, like Yuri, we all have the similar movies and films that we grew up with, and influences, and things like Dune and Alien and some of these like classic sci-fi and horror movies were really inspirational to us. But then the idea of taking that level of creativity that you wouldn't just see on the cover, but then bring that to the sequential work. And with Ascend, and now with this, you can see that plays out on every page. And I think it's just such a unique look for a graphic novel, and you can see the attention to detail in it.
The worst is when you open up a book that the cover is really cool and the inside is nothing like it, and you're like, I judged a book by its cover. Should I have? I don't know, but
yeah,
good to hear that
you
it's
definitely
the whole way
should.
through. Yeah. Mary Lise on YouTube has a whole little monologue, so I'm gonna read out Mary Lise's statements. Mary Lise says, "I can't wait to see the book. What do you think would be the perfect adaptation in the future? An animated series, a movie, or a board game? I'm curious to know how you envision your project evolving." And we talked about motion comics, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can't imagine it ends there.
I think a motion comic is great if it's done properly. Like the one thing I don't like about motion comics, not to be snooty about it, but it like just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. And sometimes I see people like take a character and cut it apart and animate it, and it was never drawn or created that way as a model. So to animate it that way, I think is doing a little disservice to the original artist and the intention of what that is. Whereas if the composition of the shot is done properly and with atmospheric events and other things, I think you can still do an animated story without having to break apart the artwork and try to turn it into something that it's not. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to criticize other creators. I just think that like, if you're going to create an animated story, then create it properly. But to do a motion comic, there are ways to respect the artwork and be able to do it that way. But I think in response to her question, I had always envisioned this as a motion picture just because of my love of movies. And I know that films are kind of a harder thing to sell these days because obviously we have short attention span theater. There's so many things that you can get on social media and YouTube and other things where it's very easily to get kind of distracted, and it's hard to get an audience to sit down in a darkened room for 90 minutes and enjoy a film. Um, but at the same time, there's something really magical about that. And I think that people are finding new ways to enjoy media like that, especially long form content when you're talking about an hour and a half film or something to that effect. Here in Los Angeles, I don't know if you've done this, but if you go to the Hollywood Forever Cemetery during the summers, they play classic movies on the side of the mortuary walls. And we saw like The Shining and a whole bunch of other horror films this summer, outdoors under the stars on the side of a mortuary, which is probably the creepiest place you can see a horror film.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, kind of the way that we kind of build community and in our society is experiencing something as a group. So when I go to a movie theater, I always loved it where either there's not another single person in the theater, which is probably bad for ticket sales, but it's amazing to be, on a giant screen and experiencing something, or there's not a single empty seat in the movie theater. Because when you have a collective audience of like 500 people all screaming, when something's happening, there's an energy about that. And I always thought that was such a brilliant marketing campaign when you saw Paranormal Activity being marketed, because there wasn't a lot to show from the film at the time for trailers. So they turned the camera around. They had like night vision cameras on people's reaction to the movie, which I thought was brilliant. And so I think, when you've got a story like Frost, which is really creepy and a slow burn, and, you're caught up in sort of the mystery of what's going on, I think that plays out really, really well in motion pictures. Obviously, people see a lot of things on streaming and other things at home, but it's too easy to get up and go to the bathroom, and you got to stick with, movies like this. And so you need something where, there's a penalty to leave the story. So I think a motion picture has always been my dream for something like this.
Okay. I mean, I was gonna pitch an HBO Max series starring Pedro Pascal.
I think it's been done.
Really, I don't see that guy anywhere. He's great.
I know,
but I never see him anywhere.
He needs to get some more work, I think.
Yeah, poor guy.
Poor guy.
Now, a quick question as we wrap things up. We talked about Frost Road. We talked about the Kickstarter. Again, for everybody out there, go to the Kickstarter and support this project. Check out what they have on there, because there's a lot of cool things on that Kickstarter page. By the way, I've seen very rudimentary Kickstarters where it's just like, throw this in, this is what you get. But there's a lot to that Kickstarter page, so congrats. Kudos to you. Mary Lise says, love it, thank you. So thank you, Mary Lise.
Thank you.
What Frost Road is by PCB Entertainment. Would you guys be able to explain PCB Entertainment and maybe other things that are coming up in the not too distant future?
Yeah, Chris, do you want to start off on this one, and then I'll fill in?
Yeah, I guess one way we could tease it is that so we're going to be doing kind of, once this Kickstarter is going and we're able to fund and kind of get this all wrapped up, we do plan to have it ready for San Diego Comic-Con, as we said. And our plan is basically from the beginning of the con to kind of celebrate Frost Road and hopefully, announce some things. And then the back half, the Saturday and Sunday, we're hoping to maybe announce our next Kickstarter. And then that will lead into the Halloween season, and it's just going to be one giant carnival. And it's just going to be fun, exciting, dark, and again, this will lead into other things because this is the first one we're doing, right? We're getting our feet wet. We're trying to see what works, because one of the things that we loved is, the knowledge and trying to give back to the community, build a community, give to those who don't know how to do certain things, either be video games, comics, whatever it may be in this entertainment field, to, give back and share our knowledge with the community, and then slowly build in, because then they can hopefully have that trust with us to be like, hey, those PCB people, they're great. They said they were going to deliver and they did, or this book exceeded my expectations, or, like I thought it was just gonna be a comic book and I got this beautiful hardcover with like an acrylic slipcase, just, under promising and over delivering type of a mantra. And so I think that's what we're trying to tease, is quality and just trying to be more than what's good, because I know a lot of people, like, attentions are short and people just kind of want their stuff now, as we kind of said earlier. And we want the whole experience when you get the book, when you open the book, and maybe when you're unwrapping the book. We want it to all be an experience, and hopefully we can get better at doing that and executing these Kickstarters, and hopefully building something together with the community.
And it really is such a community out there that is changing the way that creators like us work because um, working in the video game space and working on these larger franchises, we're like kind of the go-to people to some extent to come in and work on these franchises. So we are paid, and the reason why we've been in the industry for so long is because that's why people bring us in, because we love what we do and we deliver. And and with PCB and the projects we've done over 700 productions over the past 25 years. So people know us for getting stuff done. And this is such a great opportunity because it's our stuff, right? And it's our passion projects. And so as much as we love working on, games like Call of Duty or Titanfall or Spider-Man or Yakuza or all these games that we really pour our heart and soul into, this is our passion stuff. So when people say, well, what do you want to do? This is kind of what we want to do. And we're hoping that the audience goes along with us and they kind of realize that this is the journey that we're on. And even though Frost Road, people might say, well, it's a horror book and it's a comic book, and why are you doing that if you want to do movies and other things? But we're really, as Chris said, is we're trying to build a community, and people see the level of commitment we have to the little details of every single part of this, the experience that the audience has from when they read it. And it's the kind of story that sticks with you afterwards too, right? The concepts and everything that's there. So we really do want to create this communication and ongoing community with our fans. And like what we're doing today, this is something that we love doing. We love being part of the feedback and answering those questions and hearing what the fans like, because we incorporate that into our next projects.
Awesome. Are you able to tease a specific project that's coming out?
I may
After
have,
this?
but we'll leave it at that with a wink and a nod. I peppered it in, so for those can go back and see, be like, when it gets announced to this, then you can be like,
Okay. Okay.
There are some breadcrumbs I noticed that Chris was kind of leaving along the way.
Yeah.
So a couple Easter eggs in today's conversation.
We're gonna have some viewers, some listeners, creating like huge boards on their wall, and like with the string and the pins and everything, trying to figure out what is to come. But I'm excited for this one. When does the Kickstarter end? Is there an end date, the deadline? Is that how it works with Kickstarter? I feel old.
So we started the Kickstarter on Tuesday. So we're less than a week in, and we ran the campaign for 37 days. And the reason why is we're going to be wrapping up on April 10th, and we're doing a live appearance at Game On in Phoenix. So we'll be doing an appearance. Yuri will be there. We'll be there signing autographs for a lot of our video games and some other projects. Some reunion stuff with Tony Hawk. I worked on the Tony Hawk games, and Tony Hawk's doing some stuff. So we're going to do some fun stuff out in Phoenix at the beginning of April. And those are the last 3 days, I think, of our Kickstarter. So we wanted to kind of wrap up on a bang. So not only do we have a live appearance that's there, but we'll be doing some special giveaways and some other stuff at that convention. So that's kind of why our campaign is timed out that way. So I think April 10th is our last day of the campaign.
April 10th. Okay, a couple days after my birthday. So if anyone out there is looking to get me a graphic novel for my birthday, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Just saying.
Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day, out of your night, to be here on the show, on the Keeg Chats, and talk about Frost Road. I don't know if you guys have any last and final things to say, but I also want to know where we can find you online, and if you have anything more to plug.
Absolutely. Chris, you go for it now.
I just want to say thank you. I mean, thank you for giving us the time and allowing us to talk to your community. We really appreciate it. And if you're at San Diego Comic-Con, this is for you, Dimithri. Please come by and you can see the actual changeover and what I maybe have teased for you. But again, thank you so much to everyone who is listening, and just check us out, because again, this is a fun horror, like suspense thriller type book, but also it is the first one in a line of potential books that we want to bring to the community. And just thank you so much. And yeah, Keith.
Yeah. And no, absolutely. And if you guys do want to learn a little bit more about what we're doing for our studios and our video game side of things, it's PCB productions.com. And for our original series of stuff, it's pcb.cc, not .com, but pcb.cc. And then obviously you can find us on Kickstarter under Frost Road. And that campaign's we have 30 days from today. So we'll be doing updates on the Kickstarter site. So Chris and I have been doing just some sort of interviews here in the studio. You can see some of the lights set up here. So we've been doing some recording here to do some updates for the fans. And we're releasing artwork. And we've got a really special announcement that we're going to be doing tomorrow. But maybe, Chris, we can tease it tonight. I mean, we're close enough.
Yeah. So we'll just say it, I guess. That's a nice thing. But since we've
It'll be an exclusive just for you. But
Yeah,
So I welcome it. Go for it.
we've been getting a lot of messages about people saying, hey, we discovered it over the weekend. It's because we originally had an early bird bonus of the first 200 backers in the first 48 hours. But we had a lot of people come in the weekend and they're like, hey, like, I love this campaign. I just found it, but am I going to miss out on the early bird bonus? And what we're going to do is we're going to waive off the 48 hours and basically the first 200 backers, we will give them the early bird bonus because we think it's still fair. Everyone who gets it in the first 200 backers will get it. But we've had a lot of reach out and people saying, hey, I would love to have it. And so what we're thinking is, the first 200, y'all get the special early bird bonus, and afterwards we may offer it as like an add-on or something like that because we want to make this something fun and unique. And if people want to be early adopters, I mean, they should be rewarded. So that is what we're going to be announcing more in full on the Kickstarter tomorrow. So.
And we are at 110 backers, so we're getting close to there already. And we are going to make that formal announcement tomorrow at 9 a.m. But for your listeners and people who are watching us tonight, you guys can get a head start on that. But yeah, it's nice that we're only 7 days in and we're about 30-something% of our goal, which is nice. So we're on track. And hopefully not only do we make our goal, but as we were saying earlier, we're going to be doing these stretch goals with James and Chelsea at Dead Meat. And we're hoping that this audio drama and some of the special stretch goals that we've got planned for everybody help us not only achieve the printing of the book, but that we can start doing some of the other fun stuff that we have planned for the audience and for all of our fans.
Awesome. It seems like you guys got a lot going on and a lot you guys have planned, and I'm very excited to see what happens with all this and how Frost Road turns out because I am very interested in reading it. So you got yourself another fan here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for
having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Thank you, Chris. For everyone out there, thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. If you're watching us live, you're watching us on twitch.tv/The Keeg Show or youtube.com/The Keeg Show, or listening to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or iHeartRadio or one of the many other platforms that we're also on. We are all over there. And if you're on social media, TikTok and Instagram @The Keeg Show. This is the Keeg Chats today with writer-creator Keith Arem and PCB Entertainment's Chris Yates. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Once again, I am your host, Dimithri Perera, and this has been the Keeg Chats with Keith and Chris. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Take care. Bye.